Bienvenidos a la Iglesia Unitarian Universalista de Fresno, California. Y hoy vamos a celebrar el Día de la Tierra. Yeah. Mi nombre es Lori Tidyman Jones y pronombre personal es ella. To our online and Alluvial Avenue church campuses, hello and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Fresno. And we are celebrating Earth Day today. I'm Lori Tidyman Jones, using pronouns she, her, and I'm happy to be your worship leader today. Tim Kutzmark, our beloved Tim, is taking a very well-deserved break today, but we'll be back on the 7th. I promise I will not be here then. Promise. Let's pause a moment as we recognize that this physical campus sits within the traditional homelands of the Yokut and Mono peoples. As Unitarian Universalists, we welcome you no matter your culture of origin, age, spiritual background, or religious beliefs. We welcome you no matter what your challenges are, the amount of money you have, the level of education, or your neurodiversity. It's good to know. You're welcome with or without documentation, con papeles or sin papeles. No one is illegal here. As Unitarian Universalists, we not only open our doors to people of all sexual orientations and gender identities, we value diversity of sexuality and gender and see it as a spiritual gift. Todos son bienvenidos aquí. If you are on the virtual campus, that means you, and you want to share a joy, sorrow, concern, or gratitude, please text them to 559-209-4977. Yes, text it now. And somebody will write it down for me and bring it to me. Otherwise, if you wait, we won't have time to include it. So look forward to those. Every year, our church celebrates the gift of this earth, our home, and challenges us to learn more about it and do more for it, to nurture this place of our birth. The title of our service today is Our Earth as the Stage. In any production, and I know Tim would appreciate that, he loves Broadway. In the stage, it is the foundation of any performance. It's what the performers depend on. For us, the earth is our stage. It's our foundation. It is what we depend on to continue to be in order for us to live our lives. And often we forget that. We lose connection to it, so let us renew our relationship this morning. Today, and I know why we're really full today, because we have Mas Masumoto with us, author, farmer, activist, and fellow citizen. I'm so excited. I feel like I'm starstruck. He's going to share with us once hidden history, as well as personal stories and discoveries as they unfolded on this stage, our earth. We are fortunate and grateful for his presence, truly. Now, in the chat box, in person, or in the silent sacredness of our hearts, let's take my favorite time, greet each other, all right?
Basically, right
You're a tough crowd to break up. Yeah. The sounding of the tingsha captures our attention and calls us to focus on this moment here together.
One, two, three, four.
Thank you. he, him. I proudly serve on the worship team here at the Alluvial campus in Fresno, California. We are getting ready to light the chalice. As we saunter into spring, I reflect on the growth that we've experienced, and I admire the growth coming up from the soil all around us. I'm reminded of Freedom's Plow by Langston Hughes. A long time ago, an enslaved people heading towards freedom made up a song. Keep your hand on the plow, hold on. The plow plowed a new furrow across the field of history. Into the furrow, the freedom seed was dropped. From that seed, a tree grew, is growing, will ever grow. That tree is for everyone. That tree is for everyone, for all America, for the world. May its branches spread and shelter grow until all races and all people know its shade. Keep your hand on the plow, hold on. Lori, you mind lighting the chalice? Perfect.
Join in singing the song of praise. Morning has broken. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
Morning has broken like the first morning. Blackbird has spoken like the first bird. Praise for the singing, praise for the morning, praise for the springing, fresh from the word. Surge la aurora, qual la primera, canta la raca, voz inicial. Lura el canto, lura al alba, ya su principio transcendental. Sweet the new rains fall, sunlit from heaven, like the first dew fall on the first grass. Praise for the sweetness of the wet garden, sprung in completeness where our feet pass. Mine is the sunlight, mine is the morning, born of the one light, Eden saw play. Praise with elation, praise every morning, love recreation, love the new day.
Please remain standing as we recite our church mission statement as shown on the slides here. La misión de la Iglesia Universalista de Fresno es amar inclusivamente, crecer interiormente, servir en gratitud y trabajar por justicia. The mission of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Fresno is to love inclusively, grow spiritually, serve gratefully, and work for justice. Now we invite our children to head to their time with their wonderful teachers as we sing As You Go.
1, 2, 3. 4.
May your heart be at peace as you go to nurture the spark of your precious life. We hold you in our love as you go. We hold you in our love as you go, as you go. May your heart be at peace as you go to nurture the spark of your precious life. We hold you in our love as you go.
Because it was my kid that was last. Had to show up.
Ellis has prepared a video for us this morning that offers his thoughts on our adoption as a congregation of the 8th principle and the work that lies ahead.
Hola, buenos dias. I'm Ellis, a grateful member of the social justice team. Since the adoption of the 8th principle, I've been reflecting on how it currently mirrors my own thinking and practices, and what adjustments I will need to make so that I'm living its truth. In her article, White Supremacy, Tema Oken talks about when adopting new beliefs and practices, one often falls back on past thinking that impedes our progress. She points out that discomfort is at the root of all growth and learning, that we must welcome that discomfort, deepening our analysis of racism and oppression so we have a strong understanding of how our personal experience and feelings impact what we believe and how we act on those beliefs. She suggests that it's necessary for us to list those characteristics of white supremacy in our own thinking and in the practices of our congregation that may be used unconsciously, but make it difficult, if not impossible, to become a truly multicultural community. We may say we want to be multicultural, while actually only allowing other people and cultures to join us if they adapt or conform to our already existing cultural norms and practices. She says that being able to identify and name the cultural norms and standards we want to achieve is a first step toward a truly multicultural congregation. This is what I'm presently giving much thought to, and I believe it is vital that we as a loving congregation take this journey together to fully realize what it means to be a diverse, multicultural, beloved community.
Thank you, Ellis. There will be copies of 8th Principle related reading material available on the social justice table today. And as well, there'll be information for those of you who heard Tim McManus speak last Sunday about the IAF and our church's involvement with that. There'll be information there too. As a little promotion, starting May 4th at 6 p.m., join Karen Polnitz on Zoom for an exploration into the individual and community work we can dive into to more fully live our 8th principle. You'll have the opportunity to make connections between microaggressions and systemic injustice and develop techniques for having difficult conversations. Please sign up through our website or email Karen at dll@uufresno.org. And if any of that terminology is confusing to you, don't worry about it. This is about coming together to have conversations and learn more about the 8th principle. So, on this day of celebrating the birth and life of our earth, it's important to pause and acknowledge and appreciate the gifts continually offered to us by Mother Earth. You might visualize a strong wind that moves sullied air from our skies, a winter storm that brings promise of lasting winter. We got that this year. Native plants yielding good medicines, spring blossoms that draw in bees to make honey. As we take in breaths together this morning, let's remember some of these gifts. So try and relax into your chair, relax your hands, maybe close your eyes, maybe not. And feel yourself take in a deep breath, remembering a gift given to you from Mother Earth. And as you release that breath, say thank you to Mother Earth. And again, breath in, remembering a gift. And out, thank you, Mother Earth. And one last time, breathing in, remembering a gift, and then breathing out, thank you, Mother Earth. Some of you entered the sanctuary this morning and recorded a joy, concern, gratitude, and some of you responded online from our virtual campus. And here's some of what was shared, and there's a lot, and a lot of gratitude. From Matt B, we have grateful for titanium and modern medicine today. From Jim Park, a joy at the men's fellowship, my spiritual village. How many of you are in the men's fellowship here today? From Lauren, happy and grateful to celebrate my daughter Casey's 4th birthday this morning. From Bernadette, I live in a town that hosts Porch Fest every year. And if you haven't done it, you got to do it next year. What a wonderful day sauntering through the Tower District. From Vicki G, such joy that my niece Cara is engaged to a wonderful man. He included her 12-year-old Aiden in the ask. She said yes, and I guess Aiden did too. And they are over the moon happy. From Sharon S, thankful. Thank you, Betty F, for assuming the lead to help the folks in Allensworth. From Ida J, gratitude that my son and granddaughter are here in the Alluvial Avenue campus with me today. Where is From Paula Ferris, I told you there are a lot. Grateful for our beautiful spring weather. Love to our earth today. Amen. From Saul E, John McCann, a best friend of mine for 75 years, died this past Tuesday. Our hearts are with you, Saul. From Frank, a bon voyage to Harry Belafonte. It was a privilege to meet you. Truly beautiful man. And lastly, a sorrow from Nancy Hatcher. This week we lost our beautiful Kristen, my brother's granddaughter, waiting for a liver transplant, only 32 and leaving 2 little ones. So our heart goes out to the whole family. It's a tremendous loss. Let's also remember people who are unable to be here because of poor health or maybe compromised immobility, including Tony E, Margaret H, Bev F, Edith H, William H, Glenda R, and Pat M. So we've remembered the people in our community, but we also need to pause and recognize that we're so lucky to have this community. Not everybody has this. And I know all of you here know someone or many who don't have that. And if we could just take a moment to lovingly speak their names in our hearts. For all that has been shared today, we light our candle of community.
Comfort me, oh my soul. Comfort me, oh my soul. Consuélame. Consuélame, oh mi alma. Consuélame, 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 oh mi alma. Speak to me, speak to me. Comfort me, oh my soul. Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul.
Earth, teach me quiet as the grasses are still with new light. Earth, teach me suffering as old stones suffer with memory. Earth, teach me humility as blossoms are humble with beginning. Earth, teach me caring as mothers nurture their young. Earth, teach me courage as the tree that stands alone. Earth, teach me limitation as the ant that crawls on the ground. Earth, teach me freedom as the eagle that soars in the sky. Earth, teach me acceptance as the leaves that die each fall. Earth, teach me renewal as the seed that rises in the morning. Earth, teach me to forget myself as melted snow forgets its life. Earth, Teach me to remember kindness as dry fields weep with rain. Thank you, Lorenzo. When I learned of Moss's newly released book, The Secret Harvest, I mean like newly released like 2 weeks ago? Yeah. I jumped at the chance to read it. And the book inundated me with a plethora of substantial themes. I mean, this is, and Moss agrees, is a dense book of so much. But wearing my Earth Day lens, the critical importance of Mother Earth and the preservation and nurture of her was the theme that drew my passions. And I will get a little passionate here. Moss and his family honor Mother Earth. They started with organic farming in the 80s before it was a thing. They always serve to be good stewards of their land and advocate for Earth stewardship in our community, just as Native people have done for so long. And here's a challenge Moss recognizes as a third-generation farmer. He writes, "We quickly forget that 100 years ago, the majority of Americans lived in rural areas, 80%. The majority of people worked on farms and with food. Most of our family roots were grounded in the earth and the dirt. We urban folks have lost our connection to our mother. The truth is that 80% of our population live here, and we don't know her very well anymore. Other people maintain our home landscapes. How many people do you see out there working on their yards? No one. In the supermarkets, our fruit and vegetables are personally quite tasteless, and they're covered in plastic. We can't smell them. We can't touch them. That's how you know you want that one. They choose for us. We stay indoors and control our inner weather. We don't get our children dirty. We don't get dirty. And our children do not know how many people have touched the food before it got to them. Our lack of relationship with our Mother Earth causes us to ignore her suffering, her deterioration from our neglect, and selfish demands. This is our mother. This is our mother. She offers us everything we could possibly need, and what do? From website The World Counts, every year we extract an estimated 55 billion tons of fossil energy, minerals, metals, and biomass from the earth. The world has already lost 80% of its forests, and we're continually losing them at the rate of 375 square kilometers per day. Every hour, 1,692 acres of productive dry land become desert. 27% of our coral reefs have been destroyed. We have a garbage island floating in our ocean, mostly comprised of plastics the size of India, Europe, and Mexico. Wrap your mind around that. We are using up 50% more natural resources than the Earth can provide, and at our current population, we need 1.5 Earths. But we can't do that. So I love to garden. My friends know me well in that regard. I love the feel of my hands in the dirt, and my sisters always told me to wear gloves, but I can't do it. I've got to have my hands in it. And I start drooling. Sorry, but it's true. As I unify with the elements in a state of Zen. I love teaching my granddaughter, who turns 5 next month. I teach her about seeds and bugs and worms and dirt and sun and water and seeds and how it all comes together to nurture us. It's fun. But it's important to raise new stewards in our children. But there has to be an earth for them to take care of. All that I listed and the many, many other ways that our Mother Earth is being challenged, it overwhelms me, it exhausts me, it angers me, and I feel guilty. The April UU theme of resistance applies here, because I must resist the temptation to avert my eyes, sigh, and shrug my shoulders and say, well, I'm doing my part. Yeah, I do, a little, and it's not enough. But step by step, we can build momentum. Take someone to see our rivers. Most people are unaware we have this gorgeous river that runs right through our county. 2. Write your representatives. Buy green, plant trees, practice your own good earth care, and teach other people how to do that. Join and support local, national, global organizations that care for Mother Earth. Resist the temptation of helplessness. Resist complacency, and maybe help yourself and someone else get a little dirty. So let's sing together, Blue Boat Home.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Below me I feel the motion, standing on these mountains and plains, far away from the rolling ocean. Still my dry land heart can say, I've been sailing all my life now, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home. Sun, my sail, and moon, my rudder, as I fly the starry sea, leaning over the edge in wonder, casting questions into the deep. Drifting here with my ship's companions, all we kindred pilgrim souls, making our way by the lights of the heavens in our beautiful blue boat home. I give thanks to the waves uphold me, hail the great winds urging me on, breathe the infinite sea before me, sing the sky my sailor's song. I was born upon the fathoms, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home.
Good morning. It's such a pleasure to be here. And Lori, thank you so much for helping to set this up. And Rich, too. I'm humbled and honored to have this opportunity to share some stories. I'm a farmer who's surrounded by stories. And in my new book, Secret Harvest, it's really a journey into myself. And let me begin by reading a very short passage from the beginning. I farm with ghosts. They live in my fields. Each peach tree has pruning scars from generations who've worked these orchards. Every vine has been shaped by the hands of workers who returned each year to add their touch to the sculpture. People and families have etched their marks on my farm, and I too hope to leave behind a simple signature. And on the seemingly ordinary landscape, ghosts inhabit my family history. And one of those histories was a lost aunt, Shizuko, who became separated from our family in 1942. I grew up with no photographs of her. We had no documents, no record of her. We all believed she had passed away. Then, 70 years later, in 2012, I got a phone call that she was alive a few miles from our farm. And I spent days and weeks and months trying to verify this story. As a child, Aunt Shizuko had an intellectual disability. She had gotten meningitis at the age of 5. And so my family, though, were an immigrant family. They were poor, they were rural, they were farm workers, they were barred from owning land, they were not Christians, they were Buddhists, and they had limited access to medical care. So Shizuko grew up, and our family lived with this disability, but she seemed to find a home in the fields, in the Mother Earth that we talked about, because the earth didn't judge her. And yet my family grew up, like many families, especially of that era, with a kind of cloak of shame, because people with a disability, especially a mental disability, were often undervalued and kept invisible. So she grew up with the family. My mom, my aunts, my uncles, all were part of this farm worker family, and Shizuko, though, didn't go to school. Her school was the earth. She went out in the fields and worked with the family. Then World War II came, and the internment and forced evacuation of my family. It was an uprooted moment, and they had to make a quick decision what to do with Shizuko. Could she be better off than where they were going? And of course, they did not know where they were going. They didn't know what kind of prison they'd be in. They didn't know how long it would be. So my aunt became a ward of the state, and they gave her up. And from family stories that they told me after I was asking more, they told me this story. My aunt explained it was so very hard. Shizuko clung to my grandmother, refusing to let go, afraid of these strangers. My grandmother wept as these men guided Shizuko away into the car. Over and over, Shizuko cried one of the few words that she knew and the few words she could mouth, "Mama, Mama." Then my grandmother pulled my Uncle Mas aside and made a request, asked the authorities to make a promise. "Yakusoku," she said, "make a promise, honor the promise." And a request was made. The authorities quietly nodded their heads and affirmed their conviction. My uncle returned to reassure my grandmother that the authorities swore they would take care of Shizuko, they would honor the promise. Of course, the irony was the same government that was imprisoning my family and uprooting tens of thousands of Japanese Americans was now promising to take care of my aunt in her disability. And this was a twist, of course. They did take care of her. She was in these different facilities for 70 years. She lived into her 90s, and that's when I got the call 7 decades later. She had, I'm sure, some dramatic and traumatic moments in those years of institutional care. But she also had caregivers who took care of her. And these caregivers gave her life. It wasn't a simple story of good guys and bad guys. It was a challenge for me to kind of explore this history and these family secrets and try to put together this legacy of racism, discrimination, struggle, and yet resilience. And this was the stage, just as the earth is my stage, of our family and community. How do you have conversations with family about secrets? That was my challenge, because we never talked about this. How do I talk to my mom about this lost sister? One of the things that I discovered was that it was the context of these decisions that the family made that was the most important. It was initially easy for me to judge. How can you not let something like this happen? How did you not follow up on that? But then I began to rethink, what would I do in that situation, knowing that in the Great Depression, the 1930s, how people were taken care of that had a disability. And I remember the term that often I would run across was the idea of shame. And the shame still permeates today when we look at people with disabilities, especially intellectual mental disabilities. It's part of the history that's part of our farm in many ways, because in some ways, it was the land that helped heal these people, because they weren't judged to have a disability when they're out in the fields. And I remember growing up, some of our workers did have disabilities, and they were great workers. And I remember a neighbor, a farmer, who had some type of disability, and at first we were scared of him, and as I grew up with him, he was a kind gentleman. He just wasn't, quote, normal. And it made me rethink what was normal. And it was a twist that the earth and the land remembers, and it was me who had to review and create a new memory. So part of the questions were, of course, looking and piecing together my family history. One was, for example, my grandfather was an expert carpenter, and he made these Japanese temples and pagodas and kept them in at the house that they were renting before the war. These were one of the first things that were burned during World War II because, of course, this was the enemy who created this. My grandfather made these Japanese Buddhist altars called butsudans. And the family couldn't take them with him, so they wondered what they should do. And they contacted a kind neighbor. And it happened to be an Armenian neighbor in Fowler who took care of these butsudans, these pagan altars, while this enemy Japanese was interned and incarcerated. And it occurred to me, of course, these Armenians understood genocide. They understood judgment, and they did take care of these altars and reunited with our family after the war. Part of my research was going up to DeWitt Mental Hospital, which was outside of Auburn near Sacramento. And I got to meet a music teacher who taught at this facility. This was a place that Shizuko, my aunt, lived for about 30 years. And I asked, of course, did she know my aunt, and she couldn't remember exactly, but she had thousands of students. And she described to me this scene that I write about in Secret Harvest, that these patients with these different disabilities would get these musical instruments, and they would pound on them and shake them, all offbeat, all out of rhythm. And I asked the music teacher, you're a music teacher, how did you feel when these musicians, especially my Aunt Shizuko, who I imagine just shaking as much as she can and pounding as loud as she can, and the music teacher said that this was music to her ears. And it made me really realize and rethink this context of history and the context of my aunt, and as she grew up in this parallel world with my family. My family, of course, came back from the relocation camps, were struggling farm workers, and my aunt was, of course, in these facilities. But my aunt was different. She was feisty, as I began to learn and piece together some of these histories. And the key was to use imagination and emotions because we did not have facts and figures. I did not have access to her medical records because she was a ward of the state. And who is I, this family member that came upon her 70 years later? But it was imagination and emotions that helped complete this story. And one of those emotions, of course, was to think about how Shizuko grew up as a part of a farm worker family. She grew up in nature, in the earth, and she continued that as her life unfolded. And one of the things that struck me was when I first met Shizuko, I should back up, the phone call that I got was from a funeral home, Wild Rose Funeral Home in Fresno. And I thought, what is this funeral home phoning me? Are they trying to get me to buy an advance package or something? So, it turns out that Shizuko had a small fund that was built up over the years to take care of her funeral. And Wild Rose Funeral Home and this wonderful, kind-hearted, unsung hero named Renee Johnson wanted to make sure this stranger wouldn't die alone. So she looked up the 1930 census, found my mom with my Aunt Shizuko, phoned her funeral homes because I had written the obituary for my father who had passed 2 years earlier in 2010. And the tradition in an obituary, which I didn't know, was you write in parentheses the maiden name of my father who he married. So as Joe Takashi Masumoto married Carol parentheses Sugimoto Masumoto. And that's how they connected the two families, through an obituary. And I remember writing that thinking, you know, they charge you by words when you write it. Maybe I should save a few cents and leave that out, but I didn't. And that's how I got connected with Shizuko. So I went to go visit Renee at the funeral home. She showed me some documents. I went to the regional center, and they said, yes, Shizuko was their oldest living client. She had come back to Fresno in 1970s, and she was at different institutions. And then I went to go meet Shizuko, and at that point, she had a stroke, and she was in a coma. That's why, and in hospice, and that's why the funeral home was contacted. But to show Shizuko's personality, the assisted care facility found a way to feed her in this coma. She wasn't in an ICU unit. She wasn't in an advanced care unit. She was in a pretty basic assisted care facility. But these unsung heroes understood the value of life. They nurtured her, and 3 months later, after I got that phone call, Shizuko woke up. So I got this second call, which was a challenge because we had been planning for her funeral this whole time, right? So I went to go see her, and when I walked into the facility, and again, this facility was in West Fresno, most of the staff were people of color, and they saw me, but they were very protective of Shizuko. So when I walked in, they go, who are you? And I said, I'm her nephew. And one of the gentlemen looked at me and he says, where have you been for all these years? Put me in my place, all right? So I first went up to Shizuko. She was in a wheelchair. I introduced myself. Of course, she wouldn't know who I was, but I thought I'd do this proper introduction. And she looked at me, and then she kicked me. This was my introduction to my lost aunt. She kicked me because she wanted her shoe tied. That's how she survived 70 years in these institutions. She did not hold back. She was feisty. She's only about 4 feet and 80 pounds, all right? But she had this attitude. So they told me a few other stories. The staff told me that she loved hot coffee in the morning. So she'd drink her cup of coffee, and she said, she would say to herself, I'm done, and she'd toss the cup over her shoulder. So they quickly realized they need to change the styrofoam cups. Right? Then after a few weeks of that, they realized they need to put a wall behind her instead of throwing these cups and hitting people in many ways. In an interesting way, one of the conclusions I came to was Shizuko was not very Japanese. And it was this amazing moment to understand these two dynamics of how my family was grown up to be very Japanese, very quiet in many ways, and Shizuko was not. So we had these parallel worlds growing up with each other, side by side, and they crossed with that phone call. But it made me understand this notion of generational trauma. I had grown up in a quiet household because my parents and grandparents were interned, imprisoned, and they rarely talked about it. And I later, as I learned more, I began to get frustrated. Why didn't they tell me about these things? And then I had to realize, what would I have done in that situation? Would I have given up Shizuko to be a ward of the state, not knowing what prison I was going to, not knowing if I was going to come back, not knowing what the future was? It was so easy for me to make judgments now as opposed to put myself in that context of history, but understand that's all part of the generational trauma that we all grow up with in many different ways. It did make me also realize that every family has secrets. So I want you to pause just for a moment. What question would you have about your family? And the next time you see a family member, what question would you ask them? I remember a mechanic who came to, a great mechanic who comes to our farm, chain-smoking white guy in his 70s, you know, he asked, hey, what are you writing? And I told him this story about Shizuko, and he said, my family had a secret too. And I said, tell me what it was. And he said, he began to ask a question when he was young. Why does my sister have 2 birthdays? Her real birthday was in July, but the family, especially with the grandparents, celebrated the birthday in November because the parents were married in March. You began to understand the context of that child being born and the context of those kind of family stories. And again, the questions that you would have when you would want to ask a member of your family. So I want to pause for a moment and think, what question might you have about your family? I hear a few chuckles that are going, which is great, and understand the context of that secret that's in the family. One of the things I learned was, of course, it's easy to judge family secrets by today's standards and not the context of that situation. And that was part of what unfolded in this book, because one of them was for, of course, dealing with the topic of disabilities. I thought I understood that world of disabilities, but as I probed into Shizuko's story, I began to learn a whole lot more, not only about how the country kept the secret of disabilities. And I did research. Many cities had, through the 1920s and 30s, what they called ugly laws, where they would not want someone with a disability, especially a mental disability, to be out in public. And it was considered a misdemeanor. It was part of that idea that you keep disabilities hidden and invisible. And that still exists today in many contexts too. But it made you realize that, again, the context of history, the idea of disabilities was not just about my Aunt Shizuko, but a much broader story of our area, of our state, of our country. Also part of it was this notion of looking at disabilities through the lens of a farmer. And how when I farm organically, the notion of what is good and bad, what is right and wrong gets blurred. Because what is a perfect peach? Is it a peach that's huge and red and big, or something that inside tastes wonderful? And that was our own challenge we had on our farm when I first came back in the 1980s, trying to save an heirloom peach. And it did put things in context about these ideas of working with farming and nature and the earth in terms of looking at through the lens of what's ugly and what's not ugly. What fruit has a disability versus a fruit that doesn't have a disability. One of the stories I write about in Secret Harvest has to do with this Japanese term called wabi-sabi. And wabi-sabi is this idea that life is imperfect, impermanent, and incomplete. And the more I thought about that, that fit Shizuko's story, right? She wasn't perfect, and yet we judge her that way, and the real world is, no, she's perfect in her own world, right? I farm with imperfect peaches and nectarines. And I think we found a home for that. Also, farming is about life that's being impermanent. Mistakes aren't permanent. I like that idea, that we could evolve from that. So Shizuko, in many ways, was part of that impermanence of life. She didn't realize she had a disability, and she worked around that and lived that feisty life in many ways. And also, life is incomplete. And that was the whole saga of the story about my aunt, that our family was incomplete, just as our farm is incomplete, with generations on the land, working with my son and my daughter on the land, and a new granddaughter now. It's all about resilience in many ways, and I certainly think today's service, today's songs were all about that resilience. It's not about facts and figures, but it's about emotions, and that's the baggage that we carry. It's all about the earth is a stage to grow stories, and it's those stories that define us in many ways, and it's the stories that I hope I could leave a few of them with you today when you think about the themes of family and family secrets. Let me close with one passage that ends Secret Harvests. I believe Shizuko would have been a great farmer There's an adage circulating in the farm community, and I heard it after a hailstorm destroyed a block of our peaches just days before harvest. I watched the cold, dark clouds march across our valley, the thunder and lightning pounding our farm, and then a neighbor, and then another neighbor, plummeting with hail, knocking the fruit to the ground, slicing delicate skin, slashing the flesh as the juice oozes out. The rot will soon fester. I stood outside witnessing the unfolding drama. A neighbor contacted me, and a silence bonded two farmers. Then he softly spoke. They did an autopsy on some old farmers, and when they opened them up, they found they were filled with next years. Shizuko was filled with next years. Thank you very much.
She wants me to sing with her.
Ready? One, two, three, four.
Well, I feel like a stranger in my own hometown. There's traffic in the air when there used to be the sound of tall trees growing wild and free. Or maybe I was looking through the eyes of a child. But I swear there used to be hills and hollers here, wild turkey and the white-tailed deer, streams running crystal clear, water on its way to the Gulf of Mexico, moonshine on the mountaintop. Daddy sawing fiddle like he's never gonna stop. Lord, if these hills could talk, they'd say, sing me a song, and it goes, oh, 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 mama, leave the light on, oh, 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 shining like the sun on the shadows of history. They laid the first paved road back in 45. Now you gotta have wheels if you wanna survive. Black top over gravel, gravel over mud. Seems the oil in our veins runs thicker than the blood. But I swear there used to be hills and hollows here, wild turkey and the white-tailed deer, streams running crystal clear, water on its way to the Gulf of Mexico, moonshine on the mountaintop. Daddy sawing fiddle like he's never gonna stop. Lord, if these hills could talk, they'd say, sing me a song, and it goes, oh,
Amazing job. Just blown away by that. Thank you, guys. The seventh of our 8th principles calls for the respect of the interdependent web of all existence of which we're a part of, which I believe aligns perfectly with the messages from today. The financial contributions we receive and hear enable us to share our stories, share and receive inspiration, and do the good work in and for our communities. In this spirit, please join me in our words of offering. If not us, then who? If not open hearts, then what? If not now, then when? If not here, then where? If not generously, then how? If not us, then who? There's a slide showing you how to make your contributions right now if you're on our virtual campus. If you're on our Alluvial campus, you could always drop a check, cash, credit cards, whatever you want in that basket over there. We're happy to accept that. Also, too, if you can give generously, amazing. If you can't, we understand. If you're just trying to get by, just know your presence here today is enough, is all we need. Thank you in advance for your contributions to the continuance of the gift that is our congregation. Thank you. Take a few minutes. Oh. Did I miss that part? I'm sorry. Also, too, you could also use Cash App with $UU Fresno. Again, that's $UU Fresno. If you can go online and do that on the website. I will say I have a personal connection to Earth Day. My birthday is actually April 22nd. That is Earth Day, so I have a bit of a kinship to that date. So Moss, Lori's messages, all of this has been very poignant and very to my heart. Please join me and please join us as we extinguish the chalice this evening, or this afternoon. Extinguimos se llama, pero no es luz de verdad, el color de comunidad, el fuego de estos. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our heart. Perfect. As we exit to your right, please allow the socially distanced folks to go first. Moss will be available. There's a table out there, and if you have a chance, he's got his information out there, and you can definitely have a chat, talk with him, enjoy yourselves. Coffee hour as well. It will be outside, and just take your time. Just come and enjoy some coffee. It can be a little challenging, and I know it's a little warm today too, so I know coffee can be a little hot, but just come out and enjoy, talk, and we're not all that scary. Also, for new folks, you'll find one of our board members at the coffee hour table outside. So if you have questions, they are going to know everything. Who is our board member? Wonderful. Bill, thanks so much. And also, don't forget, this is the most important thing. I've had this on my calendar. I've sent it to my wife and all my friends and family. Our annual picnic is around the corner on May 7th. So make sure to mark your calendars, bring your food, bring your friends, guitars, tambourines, kazoos, any other instruments you'd like to bring. Also, just games, if you have cornhole, anything like that. We're going to have fun out there. Enjoy it. So yes, please do that. And I'm going to turn it over to Lori.
All right. As we prepare to end this service, I want to take an opportunity to ask any of you who have been here this is their first, second, or third time, to just let us acknowledge you and welcome you and express our appreciation for your joining us today. So if you don't mind standing up this moment, I promise you won't be there long because we're all going to join you. So anybody here for first, second, third time? Oh, there we go. Please stand. Everybody wave, wave. Thank you for being here. Now, everybody stand and join us. Thank you for coming. So, now it's time for all of us in the virtual world and here together, as you're willing and able, to place your hands over your hearts for our closing words and sung benediction. David Suzuki, a lifelong environmental activist, writes, "Our very being, essence, health, and happiness depend on Mother Earth. May we all accept this challenge, all in our own ways, to return her to a beautiful, healthy state so that future generations can continue to live and look on this place with awe." Is there an amen? Amen. Amen. Thank you, Lorenzo, Stolen Thunder, Masamoto, James Ruelas, and thank you all for being here today. Let's sing together Safe Passage.
2, 3, 4.